Hello there. You may have noticed that something's a little different today. I can't really, I've noticed that too, but I can't really put my finger on why. Something to do with the gym, maybe? In the review? Oh, yeah. I'm not in the gym today. I was going to be in the gym. I was going to do some tire flips, maybe something else. But I decided, I was a little too tired. Didn't have the energy for that. So, and if I don't have the energy for it, why force myself? So today, it's going to be a little different. I'm going to be trying something different. I'll do a walk and talk. But anyway, the other thing that's different is I'm not really working off a script today. It's funny, I wrote a script with the plan to do this like a normal gym review. But I decided to not do that, so unscripted it is. Hopefully you don't get too bored. But the thing I'm going to talk about, we'll continue on with the show, is if you're chronically on the internet like me, you may have noticed that Rooster Teeth Studios is shutting down. Yeah. What, 21 years? The internet giant that changed the landscape, I'm sure we can all agree to that, is shutting down its doors. They're going to try to sell off their IPs, I suppose. And that's it. And all I can say to that is, it's not undeserved. Now, I don't want to say, people deserve to lose their jobs. That genuinely sucks. And I do feel bad for those people. But honestly, Rooster Teeth, for the longest time now, has been kind of in free fall. In my opinion, there's no better exemplary of how they failed than with perhaps their flagship intellectual property, RWBY. I used to be a fan of that show. I watched it fairly consistently. Is he honking at me? But at a certain point, I looked at the show and I said, this kind of sucks. Rooster Teeth kind of lost me as a fan there. And, I've been a fan of Rooster Teeth for a long time. It started when I was like 10 or 11. I first saw Red versus Blue. I saw the Achievement Hunter Fails of the Week with on Halo Reach. And, I really like their stuff. But over the past few years, I just noticed something. They kind of just shit the bed. They got a little too, I don't know what you call it. They got kind of arrogant and cocky. And they said, we're Rooster Teeth. We obviously can't fail. And they did. The production of the show, how it was actually made, it's really baffling if you know anything about making fucking anything. All right. The creator, Monty Oum, which he was a great animator, very fantastic, did a lot, he did basically everything himself his animations, and on an extremely low budget. And you can kind of tell, like, okay, this is not expensive Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks type animation that's been looked over by hundreds of people, but it still had an energy, you know, especially his action scenes. They had an energy and a kinetic quality to them that made them fun to watch. However, I do have one sort of issue with RWBY, and it has to do with the production. See, Monty wasn't really interested, and to my understanding, I didn't know him personally, and I never worked on the show, but my knowledge, what I kind of understand, Monty really wasn't interested in creating a show, you know? He wanted to animate cool fight scenes, which is all good, but, you know, the idea for RWBY was, you know, that was his baby, essentially. That was his deal. So, you know, he wasn't really in charge of the writing. He left that to his buddies, Miles Luna and Kerry Shawcross. And I look at that, and I kind of say, and from what I can tell, they also, Miles and Kerry kind of directed the actors as well. They were in charge of basically day-to-day production. Monty was in charge of fight scenes and character designs. Now, my problem with that, and where I kind of raise an eyebrow, is this is like your idea. Why are you not more in charge of the production? You know, why don't you have the final say about every aspect of writing? I'm sure he did on paper, but from what I can understand about, you know, from interviews and other videos I've seen, he really just didn't want to have anything to do with making his own show and controlling a show. I find that kind of weird, you know, like, imagine if Vince Gilligan on Breaking Bad only focused on the meth making sequences. You know? That'd be kind of weird. You know, these writers, Miles and Kerry, it's important to note that they don't really have much writing experience except for what they did at Rooster Teeth. They wrote on Red vs. Blue for seasons 10, 14, and 17. A controversial season and 2 bad seasons. So, being in charge of a show that has this much of the company's effort behind it, that's supposed to be like really a big deal, I gotta question that. And what you'll kind of learn if you watch a lot of documentaries and you kind of read up on it, that these two jokers they were not even big fans of anime before they saw RWBY. And again, like, why are you writing an anime? And the other big thing that really bothers me is 2 of the voice actresses were apparently given unofficial writing positions within the company. Like, what? So, you know, they had sort of some influence at the company because they were known names. They were able to force themselves onto the writers and force their hand and say, you're gonna write it this way. That, to me, is insane. As far as the show goes, I mentioned before, I used to be a fan of the show. And I never really saw the show as a great work of fiction. It's like one of the great television shows. Getting to Breaking Bad or Justice League or Star Wars Clone Wars or some of the other greatest television shows in history. Not Game of Thrones. I always saw it as a high-end independent internet production. And yes, I know that's what it was, but it was always fun, I could always kind of forgive the holes in the writing, the plot holes, or, maybe some flawed, or not flawed, but incomplete characters. But where RWBY kind of made a mistake is they went to places that, they were trying to become a good show. What do I mean by that? So, from season 1 to season 6, I have a theory. Season 1 to season 6 was part of Monty's Bible, the series Bible. The reason I think that is you can see the progression in stakes and in places they're going in the story, progressing each season. You can kind of track the logic of what the characters are doing, where they're going, what's going to happen. Season 7, on the other hand, they're going to fuck around for a little bit, with bullshit that doesn't matter. And they're going to, have some fun. They're going to, do stupid crap that doesn't matter. But at the end of the season, everything's going to go to shit because it just has to go to shit, I guess. And also, we're going to bring back one of the characters that died in season 3 because we want to show how hot she is now. And I was watching this as the season went on. I was saying, what the fuck happened, bro? Like, what are you doing? Where is the logic? For me, season 7 was really where we took a sharp turn for Stupidville. That was right about the time when all the terrible working conditions of Rooster Teeth were revealed, how Blake and Yang's voice actors, Aaron and Barbara, were revealed to be complete assholes and, abusing writers and such, trying to put their influence on the company and all that. Underpaid animators, things of that nature. So already going into this season, it was kind of like, all right, what are we to expect here? But I'll be honest, I didn't expect it to be this bad. The story just completely lost focus around season 7. Almost like the writers didn't know what to do with the story anymore. As evidenced by bringing back Penny, a character that had died, that was meant to be significant. It showed that the show was mature, and these characters are not safe from the gravest of consequences. They're not safe from death. There's risk involved. Now it's like, you bring back that character, good God, there are a lot of cars. and you realize, like, wait a minute, there's no stakes to the plot anymore. Characters, if they die, they can just be brought back. Who cares? You know, if they bring back Penny, they can bring back Pyrrha. Why the hell not? They can bring back Ruby's mom. Hell, Yang can grow her arm back. All hunky-dory. You know, season 6, there was a particular character. I'm being kind of vague because I'm assuming that you have not watched the show. But if you watch the show, you know what I'm talking about. There's a character that people lost total trust in. By season 7, that's forgotten about. It's like, all right, well, I guess that character's an asshole, whatever. I say, what? Like, why would you do that? You can't just forget big character moments like that, or big important elements of the show like that. Man, that just shows that you have no balls when telling your story. You're so afraid of change and consequence that you just end up losing focus and losing credibility, which is a problem a lot of writers have. But I digress. And the two characters that I hate the most, Blake and Yang, you know, in season 3, Blake lost an arm, and she stopped. And so from that moment on, she hated Blake. You know, she didn't trust her. You know, Yang losing her arm was supposed to be significant for other reasons than, oh no, it's sad that the punchy girl lost an arm. She's not tough anymore. It's supposed to be emblematic of her changes of character, that she has to act a little more mature, a little more tactically. She can't think with blind emotion. And not trusting Blake was also emblematic of that. She was like, this is a person who I considered a friend, and she betrayed me. I'm not going to trust her anymore. I'm not going to fully trust her again. I might forgive her, but I can't fully trust her. Season 7, they kill Blake's dickhead ex-boyfriend. And, all right, hunky-dory. It's all good now. They're partying, which doesn't make sense for Blake's character, because she is like an introvert bookworm, so why are you going out to a fucking rave? And Yang, it doesn't make sense for a character, because why are you trusting this girl that betrayed you? Whose boyfriend chopped off your fucking arm? Lack of consequence. Like, no consequence to the show anymore. The reason they did that was to slap the characters together in a romantic relationship. So, decided I needed a little break for some water. I don't think there are any ticks or spiders or things that can sneak up on me. So, the story itself is pretty poorly written. The acting is, I would say, kind of whatever. Kind of subpar, if we're being honest. Character writing is pretty awful. The writers clearly had no idea what they were doing. You know, they contradict themselves several times throughout their story, and they just kind of write whatever without any clear direction. All of these things kind of killed my enjoyment a little bit of the show. And despite the fact that I did have a little bit of fun with it, with the action scenes, But even that, after Monty's unfortunate passing, the quality of that animation really dropped. But one of the big things that killed the show for me was honestly the fandom. Now, I never directly engaged with these people, but what I could tell is that the fandom behind the show is perhaps one of the most toxic that. Oh, look, I'm a Star Wars fan. We invented toxicity, but the RWBY fandom, man, those guys are fucking nuts. They're absolutely out of their minds. It seemed to me that the direction of the show later down the line became about it didn't become about a show anymore. It became about appeasing a certain group of people that wanted to have influence on the show no matter what. Of course, I'm talking about, Bumblebee shippers. Don't know what that is. It was a theoretical fan relationship between the characters I mentioned, Blake and Yang. People wanted them to be together for reasons I don't understand, because they're both hot and they, the fans wanted to fuck them. So, if they couldn't, they, fuck each other. That makes sense. Now, for those of you that don't know, I am something of an amateur screenwriter. I say amateur because I've never actually been paid for my work, but I'm working to. That's one of my goals in life. I'm working to make a career out of screenwriting, and now that doesn't make what I have to say, any more authoritative than what you might have to say necessarily. But I have written things before, and I have made things from my work. And from what I can tell you about fiction writing and all I've learned is that that's not how fiction writing works. Just because you think two characters are sexy doesn't mean they should be together. If you're a RWBY fan watching this, I'm going to say this: Blake and Yang are a crack ship. There's no reason for them to be together. You see, writing for romantic relationships isn't about how hot the characters are and, oh, well, they're, sexy, and, we want characters to be, whatever, not straight characters. What the hell? Writing for romantic characters relies on what do these people do in a relationship that they can't do by themselves? How do they balance off of each other? What do they bring to the relationship, and how are they better as characters for being in a relationship? Blake and Yang, they never improve as characters. They're the same characters from season 1 to the final season. The difference is that Yang got her arm chopped off and Blake cut her hair, and they changed clothes a little bit. They don't add anything. They don't make each other better. They don't challenge each other's beliefs and really do much for each other as characters. In fact, they tend to make the story worse. They tend to make bad decisions. They always make decisions that end up fucking everything up for the other characters. So this is not a good relationship here. And actually, Blake was supposed to get with another character originally, and in seeing interactions with this character in the early seasons, you could tell. And you could tell that they do balance off each other very well. This character was a very positive, outgoing character. He was like, kind of rolled the punches. And Blake, as a character, is a very negative person. So this character challenged her and said, cut that shit out. Relax, chill out. But because these characters are I don't know, whatever. But you know what's funny? Rooster Teeth had a rule that they would not read fan fiction. But they made an exception for Barbara and Aaron to read shipping fan fictions for Blake and Yang. Why the favoritism? Why the exception? And there was one thing about fandom that really pissed me off. And I've wanted to say this for years, but I never had a YouTube channel. One common criticism of the show after season 3 that is just used to discredit the direction of the show and say, everything's bad after this, is the phrase, "This isn't what Monty wanted." And this has always pissed me the fuck off. If you're watching this and you're a RWBY fan and you have used that argument as like a reason to not like the show anymore, fuck you. You're a piece of garbage. You should feel ashamed for saying that. You, as a person who did not know him, saying, I know better, and this is what Monty is not what Monty would have wanted. That argument has always pissed me off. You do not get to use the name of a man who died in your fan arguments. I am a very passionate person, obviously. I would fucking never use someone's name in an argument like that. So callously, so fucking disrespectfully. That is just piece of garbage. You want to make arguments about the show, you talk about the writing, and if you want to criticize the production of the show, that's another thing. But you do not get to use a man's name like that, especially if he died so tragically. That is just complete human garbage behavior. And you should be ashamed of that. It drives me up a wall thinking about that, man. It generally drives me crazy. One of the things about criticism online that drives me up a wall sometimes is people will make the dumbest fucking ass backwards, nonsensical arguments and nitpick the shit out of something in ways that just drive me crazy. Like Star Wars. I'll use that example. People complain about The Last Jedi in such an ass backwards. They'll nitpick little bullshit, piffling bullshit, and say, it's the worst movie ever. And they'll use hyperbole and say, man, this sucks. This is stupid. It's the worst thing ever. It's objectively bad. It killed my childhood. They say these pointless things like, Rian Johnson killed my childhood. Man, if Rian Johnson kills your childhood fucking sucked. That's what it is. It just... I know I'm ranting right now, but I'm off a script, so deal with it. They'll just say these dumbass fucking things. I'm like, man, shut the fuck up. I know free speech and everything, but really, if shit like that is the basis of your argument, then you should not be allowed to criticize media. I'm sorry to say. And I would look at this shit all the time, and I would look at these people who were clearly not qualified and would contradict themselves throughout their YouTube channels. They would have YouTube channels dedicated to RWBY discussion, and they would just contradict themselves in every other video and just make these nonsensical arguments that I looked at this shit and I said, man, I don't want to bother. I'm usually pretty good at not caring about fan discussion, but honestly, part of Rooster Teeth's problem is they cultivated a very toxic fan base. In my opinion, it was never run like a professional production. They didn't have rules or standards, and the rules they did have, they would often ignore or make exceptions for. If you were a big enough name, they'd make an exception for you because, hey man, we don't care. They allowed Barb and Aaron to dictate elements of the show. They had no right dictating. They just kind of, shit out whatever. Who cares? We don't have to put effort into this. We're making money. Well, that ship sailed, didn't it? RWBY was supposed to have, I think, 10 or a few more seasons. They ended with 9 because people just stopped watching. Like me, they kind of realized, all right, this isn't worth it anymore. And you know what? They did it to themselves. A lot more competition nowadays. Rooster Teeth is not the only show in town anymore. As far as podcasting and YouTube and whatever else, that's fairly obvious. But as far as animation goes, they're no longer the standard of independent animation. Dizzy Pop and her projects are now the standard. Hell of a Boston Has-Been Hotel. That's the new standard. The standard evolved. I know most of this review seemed like I was talking about Rooster Teeth, the production company, rather than the actual show, and that was kind of by design. I didn't really feel the need to analyze the writing. As much as I complained about the RWBY fandom, there are some pretty good reviews out there that go into deep discussion, like talking about the problems. The biggest problem, I think, is that Rooster Teeth took their fans for granted. They didn't treat them with respect. Even if not all their stuff was good, they could have at least been humble about it and say, sorry, we could try to do better. But they took their fans for granted and hit them in the ass. RWBY fell off as a show. Hell, maybe it wasn't that good to begin with. And here's where we're at. Rooster Teeth closed. They did it to themselves. Well, I guess if we could take one thing away from the closing of Rooster Teeth, is that it's a lesson to those who create independently. Don't treat your audience like idiots. Don't give them the same crap over and over again and try to improve. Even if you don't make the great stuff, try to the greatest stuff. Just try to do the best you can and be humble in your actions. Thanks for watching my videos. Sorry this one wasn't the greatest. But, I hope you found some entertainment from this. Maybe some insight. I'm taking a break for a little while. This experiment was part of a class, podcasting class. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll probably pick back up in a month or two, maybe a couple, and I probably won't release weekly. I'll probably do bi-weekly from now on until I get someone to help me film this. Sorry, this was a little bit more rambly than usual. Usually I like to work off of a script, but obviously I can't really read a script too well when I'm walking like this. I'll be in the interim, those month or couple of months, I'll be figuring out how to post to Instagram and maybe not TikTok because I might get banned soon, but I'll try to post some funny stuff, maybe some movie recommendations. I'll still be watching movies. I just won't be reviewing them for a little while. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. That's where you get updates. And you know what's going on. So anyway, that's about all I got. So I'm going to try to make it home. I've been walking for about 2 hours, which is not something I normally do. Anyway, later guys.